And that's why last week I proposed a new climate policy, eliminating the consumer carbon tax.
I wanted to mention the aviation issue because it's a very clear example, and I think a lot of people will be aware of it, and it's in the climate control report from the House Judiciary Committee. And there's also a very good video clip. I can send you that. You might want to put it in the interview with Rep. Thomas Massey. And he's saying to them, look, in your documents, you are engaging in antitrust violations because you are colluding to affect markets. And that's against the law in these states. It's been against the law for like 100 years. So in the aviation industry, they want them to reduce jet fuel consumption worldwide to 2019 levels. How to do that? They're saying that the companies have to do demand management, which in short means make life miserable for people who want to fly, even though they're your customers, because we want you to meet these stupid ESG goals. So, they're on the ropes again. They need the money. They were all very deeply affected by the COVID crash. And so, and many of them had to take money from governments, and governments forced them to comply with the carbon markets, carbon credit rules that were set up by Mark Carney and Michael Bloomberg with their task force on climate-related disclosures. So now you have an aviation company that has to issue tickets with the carbon footprint of the ticket. I'm sure everybody's seen that now, right? Yeah. You buy a ticket, it tells you how many, what your mass of CO2 footprint is for that flight. They recommend that the airline, instead of offering short-haul flights, tell people to take a high-speed train, and if it's available, or to offer a rail and aviation package to keep people from flying. So in France, they've actually done that. They've canceled all short-haul flights. You have to take a train, period. So, these are imposing on your freedoms, and you're being affected by this. You go to the airport with your bags and they go, oh, sorry, we changed the rules. You can't take that bag anymore. Yeah. You have to pay $100. And you go, what? Like, that's crazy. Last time, it was free, and then it was $25, and now it's $100. And so you're mad at the airline. But the airline is just trying to comply with these activist investor groups who are part of the climate control, collusion, and antitrust operation. So, it's disgusting. And one of the things also they noted in the report is that despite the fact that we have to eat, the fundamental fact that people have to eat, the climate cartel sees agriculture as one of the biggest targets in reducing emissions. And they said that even if all the other emissions were cut, agriculture would still be the largest emission. So, the whole thing about eat bugs is actually on the minds of these people. And behind the scenes, what you don't know is that, for instance, there's an interview with Mark Carney, and he's talking about sustainable aviation fuel. There's very, very little of that in the world. And we have a report by Robert Lyman, who summarizes a JP Morgan report. Robert Lyman's report is called Speed Bumps on the Road to Net Zero, I believe it is. Anyway, in it, he notes how tiny the amount of sustainable aviation fuel is in the world. In the interview with Mark Carney, he's talking about how in the UK, they made a law that 10% of the fuel in all flights leaving the UK has to be sustainable aviation fuel. Then he brags about how he, as part of Brookfield, found this company in Texas that was producing it. They made a huge investment there. And, you have to look at this. Mark Carney was an advisor to the UK on climate after he left his role as Bank of England governor. So, who is setting up the rules? Who is ultimately benefiting from these rules?
Mean that you may be seeing a path back to the public sector?
Well, I do spend some time advising on again, pro bono, but advising on the types of policies that are going to have maximum impacts for investors. So I'll give you an example, which is one of the issues. It's not the biggest issue. It's like 2% of global emissions. You wouldn't know it from the headlines, but 2% of global emissions is for air travel, emissions from air travel. So the question is, are we going to have green, sustainable aviation fuel? What's happened in the UK, the EU, is they've said to major airlines, look, if you're flying in and out of Heathrow or wherever, you have to have 10% of your load has to be sustainable aviation fuel by, I think it's 2030. Consequence of that policy has been to convert some entrepreneurs in Texas, in this case, a company called Infineon, to become economic. Because all of a sudden, American Airlines, British Airways need to buy that fuel. They'll pay a green premium. You've got an offtake, that's high credit quality, and so in that case, we Brookfield put $1 billion to work there, and it's a fantastic opportunity. The point being, without the policy, the policy has to drive it and drive things down. So yeah, I'm dodging your question.
I know, I know you're dodging.
And look.
And making your life more expensive and life more difficult, way more difficult for corporations who just want to do their ordinary business. They don't want to have to comply with all these ridiculous rules because none of them are for safety. None of them are for efficiency. None of them are for saving the planet. They're all for enriching these green crony capitalists. And they're actually probably damaging safety and certainly damaging efficiency. He's a big risk because he's the architect of all this.
Right. And at the end of the day, it makes certain modes of travel just completely out of the reach of a normal person. Mark Carney will still be able to fly because he can afford it. But these policies will just trap us in our little 15-minute cities. I'm so glad you pointed out the wash, rinse, repeat cycle of crony capitalism with the likes of Mark Carney, because we've just seen this with Randy Boissonnault, right? Liberal MP Randy Boissonnault. Yeah. He's in the House of Commons voting on lockdown restrictions. Bless you very much. He's in the House of Commons voting on lockdown restrictions, including the necessity to wear a mask when you vote. And then his company is selling the masks to Elections Canada. And that caused an outrage. But now we've got Mark Carney, the architect of these green schemes on one side, and then his massive investment vehicle, Brookfield, investing in the companies that stand to benefit from the green schemes. He's going to be in charge of Canada, hopefully very short-lived.
Oh, hi, it's Ezra Levant here in Toronto with an important message because we need your help. Independent journalism in Canada is under attack. Government censors, big tech deplatformers, and the dying legacy media are all working together to maintain exclusive control on the information you receive. They don't want you to hear other voices like ours, and they really don't want you to be informed and to think for yourself. That's why the work we do here at Rebel News is so important. Our on-the-ground reporting, independent news shows, and special content you won't find anywhere else. It's all designed to give you trustworthy information and alternative viewpoints so you can decide for yourself. We don't get government money, and we are not owned by some big global conglomerate. We're funded by people just like you, so please support independent journalism and help us continue our work by subscribing and becoming a Rebel News Plus member today, right here on the page. Go to rebelnewsplus.com.